Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in the life and the really unflinching legacy of Dame Vivienne Westwood.
A true cultural force.
Absolutely. A designer, a businesswoman, an activist, a genuine provocateur right up until her death in 2022. Our mission here is to synthesize the sources, to really get under the skin of these towering figures and deliver the crucial story to you.
And with Westwood, you really can't overstate her influence. I mean, Sky Arts recently ranked her the fourth most influential artist in Britain of the past 50 years.
That's a huge statement.
It is. That puts her in a category of people who have, truly defined generations.
Yeah.
And the sources show this figure who just blended art and commerce and activism in a way that, frankly, very few others have ever managed.
And when we try to define that impact, what we're really talking about is her role in bringing modern punk and a new wave. I mean, taking that raw underground energy and making it mainstream.
She gave it a visual language.
Exactly. She created the uniform for a revolution, but then in a strange way, she also had to watch that revolution get bought and sold.
And that's our mission for this deep dive, to track that whole journey. We've pulled together the sources on her life, from her start as a teacher right through to running a global brand, and her relentless activism.
The goal is to understand how she used fashion not just as clothing, but as a tool. In her own words, she was trying to see if one could put a spoke in the system.
A great way to put it.
So, to get the full picture, you have to start at the beginning. She was born Vivienne Isabel Swire in Hollingworth, Cheshire in 1941. Her family later moved to Harrow in Greater London, and she showed this early talent for art. She actually trained in jewelry and silversmithing at Harrow Art School.
But only for a very short time, just one term. And her reason for quitting is, I think, so fundamental to her entire worldview.
What was it?
She said she felt that a working-class girl like herself just couldn't make a real living in the art world. It was a practical decision, not a lack of passion, but a feeling of being an outsider from the start.
A class identity thing.
Absolutely. So that pragmatism took her down a completely different path. She worked in a factory for a bit, then went to a teacher training college.
And she became a primary school teacher. It's just wild to think of this future iconoclast, teaching children.
But even then, that creative drive was there. She was already making her own jewelry and selling it at a stall on Portobello Road.
Right.
And when she married her first husband, Derek Westwood, in 1962, she designed and made her own wedding dress. So you see that self-reliance, that need to create her own aesthetic, was there from the very beginning.
And that creative spirit was about to collide with a cultural explosion. Her marriage to Derek Westwood ended not long after she met Malcolm McLaren.
A pivotal meeting.
They moved to Clapham. Their son, Joseph Corey, was born in 1967. And what's amazing is she kept teaching until 1971.
So she's grading papers by day and, collaborating on what would become the anti-fashion movement by night.
It's an incredible double life.
And that partnership with McLaren, it's just inseparable from the birth of punk fashion. But it's also important that we acknowledge, the complexities. The sources are quite clear that later in life, she described the relationship as having been abusive.
Right, and we have to state that with the professionalism it requires, it's a sensitive topic, but it's part of the historical record, even as we talk about the incredible creative energy they had together.
Exactly, and that creative energy found its home, its laboratory, in a series of shops on King's Road in Chelsea.
This wasn't some big design studio. It was this tiny, constantly changing retail space.
It was the absolute core of the 1970s London punk scene. The names changed, the interiors changed, the clothes changed. It was like a living art installation.
So what was the first one?
The first, in 1971, was called Let It Rock, and it was all about nostalgia, specifically for the 1950s teddy boy subculture.
So looking back to an earlier youth rebellion.
Precisely. But that didn't last long. By 1972, it had already changed. It became Too Fast to Live, Too Young to Die.
A much more aggressive name.
And a more aggressive aesthetic. They shifted away from the 50s teddy boys to the 60s rocker look. And this is where the designs stop being just retro and start becoming openly provocative.
How so?
The clothes themselves were confrontational. We're talking about sleeveless T-shirts with slogans like PRV or Roppy printed on them. They were adorned with things like safety pins, chicken bones, glitter glue.
Oh.
It was intentionally crude,
Wow.
a chaotic, offensive look that was meant to signal something new and political was happening.
And the provocation just kept escalating from there, didn't it?
It really did.
Yeah.
In 1974, they remodeled again and reopened the shop as simply sex.
A name designed to stop people in their tracks.
And the products inside were just as confrontational. The whole aesthetic was grounded in fetishism and sadomasochism. The stated goal was to shock the comfortable middle class, to just, shake things up.
What kind of things were they actually selling?
Things you just couldn't buy anywhere else. Skirts and dresses made from rubber, T-shirts with actual pornographic images screen printed on them, garments with huge intentional rips and oversized zippers.
So it was fashion as a form of social commentary.
Absolutely, making the taboo visible right there on the street. In the shop itself, sex, it became the epicenter for the whole London punk scene. It's where everyone met.
But then it changed again.
One last time. In 1976, as punk was really solidifying, it was rebranded as Seditionaries. Clothes for heroes.
And this is where the punk uniform really gets codified, right?
This is it. Seditionaries continued all those themes, the historicism, the gender bending, the fetish wear, but it introduced the archetypes. This is where the famous bondage trousers came from.
The bondage trousers are probably the most iconic piece from that era. Explain the idea behind them. They were covered in straps designed to actually restrict movement.
Yes.
Which seems like a paradox for a movement supposedly about freedom and anarchy.
It is. But the restriction was the statement. It wasn't about being comfortable. It was about forcing you, and anyone who looked at you, to confront the idea of constraints. Social, political, even physical.
It's turning your body into a political billboard.
Perfectly put.
Yeah.
And other staples from Seditionaries were just as confrontational. You had the loose-knit mohair jumpers designed to look like they were unraveling.
Right, the anti-perfectionism.
And the muslin tops with long sleeves and extra fastenings that made them look like a straitjacket. It was all about making internal chaos visible on the outside.
And this whole aesthetic gets this huge global platform because of the music.
The synchronicity was perfect. McLaren was managing the Sex Pistols, and the band wore Westwood's designs. Instantly, the clothes, the music, the message, it all fused together to create the image of UK punk for the entire world.
It really cemented her own view of punk, which was never just about style for her.
Never. It was about, as she said, putting that spoke in the system. Viv Albertine from the Slits had a great observation on this. She said Westwood and McLaren used clothes not just to shock, but to inspire change.
She said it was about showing that it's okay to not be perfect, to show the messy reality of your life in your clothes.
Yeah, a total rejection of the polished, consumer-friendly look of the time. But, as the sources show, the very success of punk became its downfall in Westwood's eyes.
She got disenchanted.
Deeply. After the Sex Pistols broke up, punk went mainstream so fast. She felt that the new followers were just adopting the style, the look, without any interest in the political ideas behind it.
The uniform was being worn by people who didn't want the revolution.
Exactly. And that disillusionment caused a massive creative pivot. She turned her back on the street and just dove deep into history, specifically the 18th century.
Which feels like total whiplash. I mean, how do you go from the raw aggression of the Sex Pistols to the elaborate, aristocratic look of the 18th century?
Because she was looking at the rebellious parts of that history. Her research was, as the V&A later called it, meticulous. She wasn't looking at the powdered wigs of the royal court. She was looking at pirates.
Pirates.
Who were political outsiders, right? And even more specifically, she was inspired by the incroyables and merveilleuses of post-revolutionary France.
Ah, okay, that makes sense. They were the French nobles who survived the revolution and then wore these absurdly exaggerated, often tattered clothes to comment on the chaos of the time.
They were historical punks. They used fashion to signal their political distance from the new establishment. Westwood saw a direct parallel. And this led to her first proper runway collection, shown to the media and international buyers.
This was the Pirate Collection in 1981.
Yes, this was the moment she moved beyond the boutique model. It was a fusion of 18th and 19th century dress, but mixed with British textiles, African prints. It was global. And the music on the runway was rap and ethnic music, a clear break from rock.
She continued this historical exploration in her next collections with McLaren, right? Savages, Buffalo, Witches.
That's right. And this is also the period where she creates that iconic theatrical look for the band Adam and the Ants. She was really defining the whole new romantic movement.
And after her creative partnership with McLaren ended, her dive into historical research just got deeper. The V&A calling her a meticulous researcher almost sounds more like an academic than a fashion designer.
But she was. She spent hours in museums studying the construction of actual historical garments. And she started incorporating these elements, neck ruffs, corsets, bustles, panniers, directly into her modern collection,
taking the structures of the past and making them new.
violently modernizing them. And all that research led to one of our most famous and influential designs from that period.
The mini croonie.
Mini croonie. So this was between 1985 and 87. What was the concept there?
It was a brilliant collision of two opposing ideas. She took the Victorian crinoline, the giant hoop skirt, and she just chopped it off. She made it into an aggressively short miniskirt.
So you have the crinoline, which represents historical female restriction.
Right. And you fuse it with the miniskirt, which represents 1960s liberation.
Exactly. The visual was just incredible. It created this voluminous puffball shape that was so influential. It showed how you could take something restrictive, the frame of the crinoline, and make it playful and powerful just by changing the length. Designers like Christian Lacroix were immediately influenced by that silhouette.
This focus on history then leads her into what the sources call the pagan years.
From 88 to 91, and there's another shift here. She said her heroes were no longer the punks on the street, but tattler girls wearing clothes that parodied the upper class.
So she's moving from being an outsider attacking the system to an insider, kind of subverting it from within.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah.
She started using the language of the establishment tweeds, tailoring aristocratic styles, to comment on it. She realized to put a spoke in the machine, he doesn't also get invited inside first.
You can see that so clearly with her autumn-winter 87-88 Harris tweed collection.
A huge moment. That collection is really credited with reviving the use of Harris tweed in high fashion. It was a massive boost for that traditional industry.
But it also saw her introduce her orb logo, which was a bit controversial at first.
It was the orb logo. The sovereign's orb from the crown jewels, but with a satellite ring around it, was a perfect symbol for her. Royalty and the future, tradition and rebellion.
But the controversy was because it looked a lot like the Harris Tweed Authority's own mark.
It did. And some people were not happy about it. But what's interesting is how that relationship evolved. After she died, the Harris Tweed Authority themselves said that while it was controversial at first, the two brands later collaborated very successfully. It just shows her power to co-opt the symbols of British heritage and eventually be accepted by them.
And that ability to go from agitator to, well, a respected, if still controversial, pillar of the industry is key to her commercial growth. The company just exploded.
The expansion was huge. We're not talking about a single boutique anymore. By 2015, Vivienne Westwood Ltd. was a global empire. 12 retail stores here in the UK, but 63 shops worldwide.
The growth in Asia was particularly massive, wasn't it?
It was. The sources list 18 shops in South Korea, 9 in China, 9 in Hong Kong. And by 2025, the brand's website listed over 100 stores in 17 countries. She was a global commercial force.
And this is where the contradictions really start to become, well, very public.
The tension becomes unavoidable,
Okay.
especially when you put the commercial success next to her very loud, very sincere political activism, which is often anti-capitalist.
Let's unpack the tax and transparency controversy because it's a bit complex, but it's so important. In 2011, her company had to pay a big bill to HMRC.
A very big bill. £350,000 in back taxes, plus another £144,000 in interest.
And this was because HMRC argued that the brand itself had been undervalued years earlier.
That's right. Back in 2002, her UK business sold the trademark rights to her own name to a company she controlled called Latimo, which was based in Luxembourg.
A tax haven.
A well-known tax haven. And the price for those rights was set at £840,000. HMRC came in later and said basically, no, the Vivienne Westwood brand is worth far more than that. They reassessed the value, and that's what triggered the extra tax bill.
And all the while, her UK company was paying millions to this offshore company just for the right to use her own name.
£2 million a year, yes. And it's important to say this was all technically legal, but the ethical conflict was massive.
Especially because she became a major donor to the Green Party.
Who are, of course, fiercely against the use of offshore tax havens. It was a direct contradiction of their party policy.
And it came to a head in 2015, didn't it? Even though she donated £300,000 to their election campaign, she was actually excluded from a Youth Wing campaign tour.
Yes. They said her corporate tax structure, even if legal, went against their principles. It's such a stark example of that pension in her life. She said at the time she was disappointed she wasn't pure enough for them.
Did she change anything?
She did. She later confirmed that she had restructured her tax arrangements to try and bring them more in line with Green Party policy, so she clearly felt that pressure.
And the ethical critiques went beyond taxes. A Lux magazine published a piece in 2013 that was pretty critical of her environmental credentials.
It was. It basically accused her of using the green movement as more of a marketing tool than a core business principle.
What were their main points?
Well, first, the sheer volume. Despite her constant message to the public to buy less, her company was putting out 9 collections a year.
9. The industry standard is what, 2? Maybe 4 with pre-collections?
Exactly. The output was completely at odds with the message of consuming less. Then there were the materials.
Right.
They pointed out that some of her lines, especially those made in China, used unsustainable synthetics like PVC, polyester, and viscose, and contained harmful chemicals.
Which is a huge problem for someone who's a leading voice on environmentalism.
A huge disconnect. And finally, the magazine raised allegations about labor practices, specifically the use of unpaid interns who were allegedly working more than 40 hours a week. It all paints this very complex picture of an activist trying to operate within a global capitalist system.
Yet, despite all these controversies, or maybe even because of them, her reach into the mainstream was just undeniable. She took on these huge commercial projects, like designing the uniforms for Virgin Atlantic.
And even there, she tried to merge her activism with the work. The uniforms were made from recycled polyester, a nod to sustainability. They were classic Westwood, though engineered to accentuate the female form with a very sharp 3-piece suit for the men.
Her connection to music continued long after punk, too. She designed for Duran Duran in the 90s.
She did for their 1993 The Wedding Album tour. She created all those iconic, colorful suits they wore in the videos for Ordinary World and Come Undone.
But the biggest mainstream moment, arguably, was the Sex and the City film.
Oh, absolutely. The wedding dress. Carrie Bradshaw is gifted this incredible, one-of-a-kind Westwood gown. It's a major plot point.
And it became one of the most memorable things about that movie. The sources say that when they released a knee-length version of that dress online, it sold out in hours.
Which just shows the sheer commercial power her name had at that point. Anti-consumerist message or not, people desperately wanted to buy her clothes.
And what's so remarkable is how her political activism ran in parallel to all of this. It wasn't something she came to late in life. She was always vocal.
Always. Back in 2005, she partnered with the civil rights group Liberty.
What was that for?
They launched T-shirts and even baby clothes with the slogan, "I am not a terrorist, please don't arrest me."
Wow.
It was a direct protest to defend habeas corpus, to fight against the idea of arbitrary arrest. She was deeply passionate about it.
And her political allegiances could be surprising. She famously switched her support from Labor to the Conservatives in 2007.
She did. And her reason was, again, civil liberties. She felt the Labor government at the time had gone too far, had overreached on issues of human rights.
Her activism was also very hands-on. She wasn't just donating money.
Not at all. In 2008, she was there in person at a huge campaign for nuclear disarmament demonstration. And a year later, she made this grand public gesture of cutting off all her hair to highlight the dangers of climate change.
She was a master of the symbolic act.
She was. And she used her platform to promote vegetarianism with PETA, focusing on the massive water consumption of the meat industry. He was always connecting the dots between personal choice and global impact.
This all seems to feed into her act of resistance to propaganda manifesto. What was that?
It was her attempt to lay out her whole philosophy. She'd been speaking out against what she called the drug of consumerism for years.
And she must have known the contradiction, selling expensive clothes while saying that.
She was totally upfront about it. Her advice to her own customers was just brilliantly blunt. She'd say, just don't buy too much. The manifesto itself was much deeper, though. It was this philosophical text where she claimed to get to the root of the human predicament. Her solution was that people needed to become more cultivated.
And what did cultivated mean to her?
It meant engaging with art, with ideas, with history. It was the antidote to just passively accepting the propaganda of consumer culture. And the manifesto had a hard political edge.
I remember this line. Capitalism is a war. Economy plus war is the biggest polluter.
That's the one. She drew a direct line from our economic system to global conflict and environmental destruction. And she didn't just write it down. She had it distributed as a booklet. She even staged it as a play. She used every tool she had.
Her activism also became very focused on her support for Julian Assange and WikiLeaks.
She was one of his most prominent and long-standing supporters. She called him a freedom fighter and used her work to support him constantly.
How did she do that?
Her runway shows often became protests. In 2013, she dedicated a whole collection to Chelsea Manning. The models all wore these large badges with Manning's face and the word truth.
Right, and she had the I am Julian Assange t-shirts.
She wore them at London Fashion Week. She understood the power of an image. But her most dramatic protest was in 2020.
The birdcage.
The birdcage. Outside the Old Bailey, protesting his possible extradition, she suspended herself inside a giant birdcage wearing a bright yellow suit.
What an image.
She called herself the canary in the coal mine, a warning against what she saw as government corruption. It was pure political theater, and it worked. The image was everywhere.
And that support was personal, too. She designed his wedding outfit.
She and her husband, Andreas Kronthaler, designed the outfits for his wedding to Stella Morris, which took place in prison, a Scottish kilt for him, a dress with graffiti on it for her. It was a final, powerful statement of solidarity through fashion.
And what's so fascinating is how the very establishment she spent her life fighting against also ended up embracing her.
Completely. She received the highest official honors. In 1992, she was appointed an Officer of the Order of the British Empire, an OBE.
And that ceremony gave us one of the all-time great Westwood anecdotes.
The twirling story.
Tell it.
She went to Buckingham Palace to receive the honor, but she famously wore no knickers under her skirt. And as she came out, she did a little twirl for the photographers.
She claimed she just wanted to show off the outfit.
She did. And she also noted that she'd heard the resulting picture amused the Queen. It's just perfectly her, accepting the honor, but on her own subversive terms.
And then she was made a dame in 2006.
A Dame Commander of the same order, the DBE. Plus, she won British Designer of the Year 3 times. She was fully integrated into the establishment she had once sought to burn down.
It's incredible, and she even redesigned academic gowns for King's College London, the ultimate establishment uniform.
And her comment on that was so telling. She said she was trying to link the past, the present, and the future. She wasn't destroying tradition anymore. She was updating it, infiltrating it.
She went from being a rebel to a national treasure. She was on a postage stamp.
She was. Part of the Great British Fashion Series in 2012. Her personal life was just as interesting. She was married to her former student, Andreas Kronthaler, from 1992. And for 30 years, she lived in an ex-council flat in Clapham.
Still connected to her working-class roots.
Until he convinced her to move into a grand old Queen Anne-style house nearby, where she took up gardening. She was a vegetarian, a spiritual Taoist, a complex person.
And she never stopped being an activist. For her 80th birthday, she didn't have a party.
No, she commissioned a 10-minute video that was played on the giant screens at Piccadilly Circus. It was her, performing a rewritten song from My Fair Lady as a warning about climate change and the arms trade.
The message was still, capitalism is a war economy, right to the end.
Right to the very end. She died on December 29, 2022, at the age of 81. And the tributes that poured in just showed the breadth of her influence.
From Glenn Matlock of the Sex Pistols.
To Boy George. To Chrissie Hynde from the Pretenders, who'd worked in her shop back in the 70s. She said the world was already a less interesting place without her.
Even politicians like Caroline Lucas from the Green Party called her a true legend.
And at her private funeral, in a final poetic touch, the church was decorated with 45 meters of McLeod Harris tweed tartan, bringing her entire career, her revival of British textiles, full circle.
So when you look at it all, that tension is what defines her, isn't it? The iconoclast who used all the tools of the establishment, the commerce, the media, the royal honors, to push a radical message.
It's the whole story. The activist who sold expensive dresses, the anti-monarchist who became a dame. And it poses that question. How does a revolutionary maintain that radical spirit once they become not just accepted but celebrated by the very system they set out to disrupt?
Her journey from the Teddy Boy references in Let It Rock to designing academic gowns for a university, it feels less like simple rebellion and more like a decades-long project of infiltration.
She didn't stay outside throwing rocks. She walked through the front door wearing something outrageous and then started redecorating the palace from the inside.
That dual role, the ultimate outsider who became the ultimate insider, the iconoclast and the institution, that's her most complex legacy.
And it leaves you with that question. What's more effective for creating real change? Is it attacking the system from the outside, or is it strategically infiltrating it and changing it from within?
And that idea that strategic infiltration might be the most radical act of all is the final thought we want to leave you with, synthesized from everything we've seen in the sources about the one and only Vivienne Westwood.